the idea came from two parts. One was the medical side, which is how can we use vibration? And the other side was pleasure and wellness. How can we bring the mystery back in the bedroom, especially after something major happens and pain, dryness, etc. take over instead of pleasure?
What if the future of health isn't just therapy or medication, but technology designed to actually solve a problem? Today in the lab, we're joined by Dr. Soum Rakshit, biomedical engineer, founder and CEO of MysteryVibe and MV Health, who is leading the charge in medical-grade sex tech innovation. In this conversation, we break down the science behind vibration therapy, how these devices are developed and validated, and why accessibility, not just innovation, is often the biggest barrier in this space. If you're curious about where health, medicine, and technology are heading next, this episode is for you. Welcome to Sexology Lab. Welcome, Soum.
Thank you so much for having me, Michelle, having me back.
All right, well, I want to jump right in with a question for you. So, what problem in sexual health were you trying to solve when you started MysteryVibe and MV Health?
Kind of in the name. So the idea was, can we address the lack of sexual health or the lack of solutions to sexual health post major life events, childbirth, post surgery, post cancer recovery, or aging, prostate-related issues, menopause-related issues? We realized that there's obviously lots of urology, gynecological issues, but they specifically affect us after major life events. And the idea came from two parts. One was the medical side, which is how can we use vibration? And the other side was pleasure and wellness. How can we bring the mystery back in the bedroom, especially after something major happens and pain, dryness, etc. take over instead of pleasure?
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Now, I want to hear your 30-second origin story. So, what made you decide that you wanted to specialize in this space?
That's actually quite straightforward. So when we started, we went to an area of NHS called Clinical Entrepreneurship Program. And the professor who was in charge of that, this is in London, he introduced me to his professor. And his professor happened to research on vibration for 30 years and in the area of urogyne. So we were looking for things where we can add value as biomedical engineers. And when we realized that how big an issue urology and gynecology was in terms of unmet need, in terms of lack of solutions, in terms of lack of discussion, education, it was so obvious that if we could do something, it would be impactful. And that's how we started.
Now, is there a trend happening right now in the sex tech space that really excites you?
What excites me most is tailored healthcare with hormones. So, for example, we have continuous glucose monitoring, and then being able to adapt the medication for someone with diabetes, for example, tailored to them. So the personalized medicine, that would have so much bigger impact if it was personalized to your hormone levels, even on a daily basis, because it changes. And this applies specifically to women's health, but equally to men's health. And I think it's not far in terms of the tech before we have continuous hormone monitoring, easily accessible, very cheap and very simple, so that things like hormone supplements can be way more effective if it's tailored to that individual on that day than it is now. So that's kind of the big next step, which is so exciting. It has so many implications: libido, arousal, orgasm, wetness, general health and well-being, mood. It's just so much that we can improve with the right hormones.
Oh, yeah, that is exciting. I can't wait to see what develops in that space. All right. Now, you come from an engineering background, but you work deeply in sexual medicine. So, how did those two worlds come together for you?
I still feel like I'm an engineer. I always, look at it as a innovation where we can bring in stuff like tech that works elsewhere. For example, a watch which has magnetic strap, is a very well-established tech. It's been around for maybe 5+ years. And if we can use that to create compression post-penile surgery to replace the bandages, that makes it so much easier for the patient to look after their recovery, waterproof, reusable, compared to having to change bandages. So there's a very simple use case of engineering that already exists and is very useful elsewhere and bringing it to sexual health. The actual medical side of it obviously is very complicated, penile surgery, and that's something we would never understand the details of. But my goal is always to get the right requirements from the clinicians and the patients so we can build what is fit for purpose and delivers efficacy and very much adjacent to the healthcare specialist. So still very much an engineer, but focusing on delivering access to solutions which are fit for purpose.
Yes, that's a really good example of finding a problem and solving it. You and I have talked before about sex tech and, where people might start if they're interested in this field. And you told me before, find a problem and find a solution for it. And that's a really good example.
Yeah, and on the problem side, it's so easy if you go and meet people, patients, meet doctors, meet hospitals, meet clinics, and they'll tell you there's so many issues that need solving, especially in sexual health. So we don't even have to look far. We just talk to enough people and we get way more things that we need to solve than we can. So I think the lack of problems luckily is not a problem in this space.
Right.
There's enough things to solve. It's more building the team, raising enough capital, because when it comes to medical devices, there isn't really any way of doing that without some form of investment, whether it's a grant, whether it's research, funding, or equity, loans, etc. It's developing hardware to a medical standard and getting it regulated before a single patient can use it. And that's not something, unlike in software, where you could literally code it yourself and release it and test. With medical device hardware, it's at least, I would say, 2 to 3 years from the day you start to the day someone can test it, if all goes well.
So I'm curious, when you're developing products, how do you decide what belongs under MysteryVibe, which is your consumer brand, versus MV Health, which is more of the clinical side of things?
So we have kept them identical. And the reason is we want all the research and innovation that we do in healthcare to be easily accessible to people, whether or not they have a healthcare condition. So, for example, we have a pelvic pain device called Crescendo, which was designed by pelvic floor therapists specifically for maternal care in a post-childbirth. But somebody might purchase it purely for improving their arousal, orgasm, etc. And we even did studies on that because we want people to use them however they find it useful rather than just for specific conditions. Where the conditions matter is if it is reimbursed. So let's say if a veteran goes to one of the VA centers with pelvic pain, they can get Crescendo fully reimbursed, but in that case, it needs to be for a specific thing. But if somebody's purchasing it for themselves, it could be for a whole host of things, which is why we do so many studies, we publish so many papers, whether it's on arousal disorder, orgasm disorder, anorgasmia, penetration pain, pelvic pain. It's often different doctors wanting to study it for different conditions, but equally different users and patients trying it for different things.
And it just makes it so much more accessible if people can be reimbursed.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. So the accessibility to us is the key because innovation is actually not the hard bit. The making good hardware is a matter of doing it slowly, carefully with enough feedback. But what is much harder is making people aware that these conditions are there, which seems obvious to us. People would know about pelvic pain after childbirth, but the reality is that education doesn't really exist at mass level. So within our world of sexual health and wellness, we talk about these things all the time. So we forget that the normal public, if you tell them, hey, do you have pelvic pain, may not even know what pelvic is. And that's the big challenge in sexual health is one, educating people that they might have some issue that needs looking at, two, getting them to see a specialist. And also finding a specialist is hard. Primary care physician may not be trained in it. And then once they have it, then getting the right amount of care. So for example, a PT could be, let's say 3 times a week for 12 weeks. That's a lot of sessions that they need to commit time for. Or, if it's a device, having knowledge that device solution exists and having the right reimbursement to get it if they want to get it. It's a very big journey in terms of accessing sexual health solutions.
And so what are you doing right now at MV Health to help get the word out to people, to help them understand and get educated?
Different things. So a big part of our work is being present at every sexual health event, like Shaw, like Pelvicon, like ISWITS, menopause, OGS, AUA, you name it. We try to attend everything, and not just attend, but actually have a booth, a stand, educate people, whether it's patients, doctors, clinicians, PTs, everyone. And it's a very time consuming long term thing. And we've been doing it for 5 years. But the more we do it, the more we educate people and the more the word of mouth spreads. It's one of those things which has to be done face to face, in person, meeting people. To us, that's the fun bit, is going out and meeting people and sharing, and also learning through those events what other problems are out there that we need to be solving and making products for. So that's, I would say, our biggest part of outreach and word of mouth is very physical, very in person, generally research and publishing papers. And that's something we don't do ourselves to be completely independent. So we look for people researching in these areas, support them by providing two things. One is the products for free, and the second is the patient recruitment cost, which isn't much, but it's still a good help from their side. But we don't prescribe, what the study should be, what the outcomes are aimed for. So that way it's truly independent. And that's this whole other piece of conference that doctors go and present in, which then creates more awareness, not just for our devices, but vibration as a whole can be effective in this area of women's and men's health. And that is so important to get that credibility out there. Yes, it can be for pleasure, and that's a great thing, but equally it can be, when done medically, very effective for solving problems.
Absolutely. And by going to these events and speaking to the professionals in the field, it has such a huge ripple effect. You could talk to one physician that can go out and educate their colleagues and educate their patients. That's really incredible.
Yes, 100%. And we've come this far only because of word of mouth, because our actual paid marketing is minuscule.
I want to talk to you a little bit about vibration therapy and the science behind it. So, at a high level, what does the evidence actually show about targeted vibration therapy for sexual function?
This is actually where we are lucky, because long before we started, long before our professors started researching, there was decades of clinical evidence on vibration, which goes back 100 years. Vibration, when it started in the 1880s for sexual dysfunction, was purely a medical device. And even if we look back advertisements for vibrators in physical newspapers from 1930s, 40s, 50s, it's all listed under conditions that it can address. It's only later in the 70s that the pleasure aspect came in, and then it became the big part and became the main part. So in modern times, people mainly associate vibrators with pleasure, but I would say the 70% of the years it's been around, it was for medical. So there's a huge wealth of evidence on it, and there's new research coming out all the time. Like in Cedars-Sinai, Dr. Alexandra Dubinskaya does a lot of research on vibrators and publishes. So she's one of the leaders in this space. And even the work we've done with various doctors, now we have 23 publications that has happened over the last 10 years. So, there's always new good work happening, which is bringing the concept of vibration back to its core, which is it has huge amount of medical benefits, and pleasure is one of them. And the underlying theory is really simple, which is when you vibrate an area, it creates fresh oxygenated blood to get there. There's blood flow mechanism, and blood flow then helps with everything else. So it helps with erection, it helps with arousal, it helps with pain relief. It's actually not specific to urogyne. The same application would be, let's say, a Theragun, which is a vibrator for back pain. The underlying concept is exactly the same. It's just different intensity and different frequency. But if you apply that vibration on your back, it would do the same thing. It would help with pain relief. And that makes our job 100 times easier, which is we're not trying to prove new science. The science has existed forever. All we do is make it very tailored for specific conditions. So if it's for prostate, it would be a very slim device like a finger that bends, that either the clinician or the patient can insert very gently and reach the prostate and vibrate it. It's not complicated tech. So if you're in your 70s, you don't care about apps and Bluetooth, you can still use it just by pressing a button, turning it on, inserting, reaching the prostate carefully, gently, and letting the vibration do its job. So that's really where we come in with our engineering, not in fundamental science research, which has already been done in terms of how vibration helps.
Yeah, absolutely. You're not starting from scratch here, which is nice.
Yeah, and that makes a massive difference.
Yeah, definitely. And now, why does vibration rather than medication matter for some people?
Often it's actually complementary, but sometimes medication is not possible for some people. So, for example, with Viagra, if you have heart conditions, the pharmacist might refuse to give you Viagra. So that option would simply not exist, or any PDE5 inhibitors. Then the issue becomes, do you either take the risk and somehow get the medication without the pharmacist's approval, or you have no solution, or you try something else? That's where devices as a general category of medtech is so useful. You can't ever get a side effect from a hardware. It either works or doesn't work, and that's it. The beauty of that is also hardware is a one-time cost, and it should last at least 3, 4, 5 years. So there's two big things. One is medication may not be valid in the sense that you may not qualify for it. And two is, even if you do, there will be some side effects. So, for example, headaches are a common side effect of Viagra. And people, as long as they know it and they're okay with it and they manage how much they take, it's okay. And it could be a complementary thing. So they might be like, okay, fine, I'll take tablets once a week. I'll use the device a couple of times a week, and then I'll take it. So, they can complement each other and balance it out. So we don't really think of devices as an alternative. It's more complement. And the only time it's an alternative is when the medicine option is not available.
Right. Like if somebody's got like a heart condition or something and they just like
Correct.
can't
Exactly.
take the medicine,
take
it's
it.
like, well,
Then
there's
at least you
nothing
have
else,
something. And the other thing I would say is, apart from medicine, where devices are really helpful, is to provide a complement for therapy. So, for example, with PT, let's say the ideal number would be at least 2 or 3 times a week for many, many weeks. And neither the PT nor the patient will have that kind of time. So what we see happen is the PT will do the first session, train them, give them the device, they go home, they use it 3 times a week for 12 weeks, and they come back and then have the final session, and they achieve the same outcome as if they went 3 times a week for 12 weeks. And in this case, it's not that the device is any better, the therapy and the device would deliver the same thing, but it's more the access to the solution at home, which is almost impossible. Like getting a PT to come to your house will be so hard. And also having access to a PT nearby who has time that you can go 3 times a week for 12 weeks is very hard. This is where devices can be super useful.
Yeah, and just the logistics, like if you have to take off work or you have to secure childcare, there's a million other things that are involved with that too. Are you curious about sexology? Do you want to further integrate sexology into your work or your life? Well, friends, then we've got something just for you. It's called the Sexology Practice Guide, and it walks you through the ways this shows up in your work, in your life, and guides you through working within your scope, incorporating intimacy and sexual health into your work without starting over. Download this short, practical guide at sexologylab.com/guide. That's sexologylab.com/guide. And while you're here, make sure to subscribe and share. And now, back to the show. All right. Now, if somebody's listening and they're like, okay, I want to know, what are these products that you guys are talking about here? I want to do a little product deep dive into each product that MV offers right now. So first, I want to talk about the Crescendo 2. What is it? Who is it most helpful for clinically? And what makes it different and unique?
Crescendo, originally Crescendo and then Crescendo 2 is our oldest product. So that's how we started 12 years ago. So it has the most papers, most evidence, most patients. And it was developed by pelvic floor therapists, literally to mimic 2 fingers. And that's it, literally. It just does that. It bends like 2 fingers so that either the clinician or the patient can bend it to reach the exact point on the pelvic floor, on the vaginal wall, wherever they need it, to then deliver vibration there as little or as much as they want. The beauty of it is because it can bend whichever way, you can insert and reach and see what you feel, and then bend it, reach another part and see what you feel, and you're fully in control of exactly what you want. So that's really the fundamental design behind Crescendo.
And so if we've got a sex therapist listening to this and they're like, who would be a good person I could recommend this for? What would you say?
Typically anyone coming in for pelvic pain. So that's what this was developed for, not incontinence. So we haven't done studies on incontinence yet, which is why we don't know whether it will help. We have done loads of studies on pelvic pain, GPPD, vaginal dryness, anorgasmia. And a typical use case would be post-childbirth.
Yeah. And I'm just curious too. So a sex therapist, would they need to provide specific instructions for how to use it? Does it come with instructions? Are there videos?
It comes with a really beautifully designed instruction. It's just a 1-pager with 2 sides, and it's designed by PTs. which has instructions written in text, and on the other side has visuals of how to use it in different angles, how to insert it. So it's very simple.
Yeah, amazing. Now, does it have 6 motors? Did I read that right?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yes.
And
Yeah.
so what does having multiple motors change for the user?
The main reason for having multiple motors is to create the ripple effect. So whereas with one motor at the top, we can only deliver vibration in one way at one point. Whereas what we wanted to understand is by having different vibration throughout, we work with the doctors to create specific vibration patterns so that we can study what works in various patients. And often what we would do is we would set up multiple patterns in the devices so the patients can try them and see which one works best for them. And the only way we can do that is by having multiple motors, which creates the ripple effect.
Yeah, so interesting. All right, I want to talk to you now about the Poco. So tell me more about the Poco. How is it different from the Crescendo, both in design and clinical intent? Who is it designed for? Tell me everything.
Poco's literally mini Crescendo. It's a very small, compact device. It was developed for two reasons. One is we got a lot of feedback from patients saying, do you have something smaller for external use mainly? Because obviously Crescendo is designed to reach as deep as you need to reach the pain points. So it's quite a long device. And Poco is less than half the size. So it's really, much, much more compact. So that was our main objective. And a good clinical example of that is recently NHS here in England published a study with Poco, a 6-year randomized clinical trial, really big study, which showed how Poco can be used as external vibrator on the labia to help reduce pain of dilation for vaginismus patients as an adjunct device to help. So it's a very simple concept where we are not changing what is the current setup, which is use of dilators for dilation in vaginismus, but it's a painful process and vibration help. And that's what they studied. And then they proved that over many years that vibration was very effective and that it should be recommended as something that you use when you're dilating.
Yeah, absolutely. And then this also supports natural lubrication, correct?
Correct, exactly, which is vibration, generally.
All right. Now, next, I want to talk about the Legato. Did I say that correct?
Which goes very nicely from the Poco because Poco is something you hold and you pinpoint. And Legato was designed actually as a result of Tenuto 2, which came out earlier. And quickly, just talking about Tenuto 2 was designed for ED to help stimulate the penis, get blood flow in a whole direction. What a lot of the menopause specialists observed is that their patients were using Tenuto, the front of it, on their labia to create arousal and wetness. So they then said, can you make a device which adapts to the labia that they can use independently and is tailored for that rather than something designed for something else? So then extending from what I was talking about with Poco, applying vibration on the labia is exactly what Legato is, but dedicated in that shape of O, which bends and adapts to the labia and vibrates to create lubrication, create arousal, and have a gap big enough for penetrative intercourse with the device still on.
That's incredible. And now, so who would be the ideal first for Legato?
Legato is mainly used at menopause clinics for menopause users because Legato is really for women or patients who cannot insert anything. That's really the main group of people who would use Legato, simply because if you are able to insert, you can benefit more stimulation from something like Crescendo, which you can get both internal and external stimulation. Whereas if you have atrophy, dryness, etc., and you don't want to insert anything, or you would rather not, then Legato is super useful.
Yeah. And then also, too, though, on the flip side, if you're trying to use it more just for pleasure, you could use it because it has an opening. So it can be used during intercourse.
Yes, 100%. Yeah. Which is why it's designed to be quite big.
Very cool. All right. I want to talk about the Molto, the prostate self-care. It's designed to mimic manual prostate techniques used by urologists. And so how did you turn that into a device?
Molto is what we think is the most obvious device that we never thought of. Till urologists told us all we do is insert an index finger to reach the prostate. Can you make one? Which seems so obvious now, which is literally where we started with 2 fingers and pelvic floor therapy. Except that, often we have to be told, can you build it before we do it? And that's literally Molto. It is the thickness and length of an index finger. It is very slim and it has one motor at the top because it's a very pinpoint, a very simple device and it's flexible If you insert it, it adapts to the rectum, reaches the prostate, and you vibrate it. Very, very simple. It's very easy to use. And often it's the one with our audience who are older. So we wanted to keep it as simple as possible. Like if you're in your 70s and, my dad is 80, if it has Bluetooth and connectivity and all of that, an app, he gets very confused. We wanted to keep it super easy. Say, you are recovering from surgery and your doctor said, please do something about your prostate, use this device once a week for 5 minutes, then it will maintain your prostate health or improve your prostate health. You want it to be super easy. Just turn it on, insert it as slowly as you want, be very careful, comfortable, which is the biggest advantage of doing it at home, apart from privacy and discretion, which is obviously very important.
And so this can be used to relieve pain, and then can it also be used for pleasure?
Yes, 100%. And actually, there is so much anecdotal evidence on the fact that regular prostate stimulation leads to improved prostate and lower prostate cancer, even though there is no clinical literature, because it would be really hard to study this because it would need a 30-year study where there'll be so many other factors. So it's very hard to truly medically understand how much correlation there is with regular prostate stimulation and a reduction in prostate cancer. But there's a general expectation and anecdotal evidence that regular prostate stimulation would lead to better prostate health and lower prostate cancer.
Yeah, yeah. And then what about women or people without a prostate? Do you have any feedback on women using this particular device?
Yes, actually the other way around. So we found lots of doctors using Molto vaginally for patients for PT even. And again, this is something we had not expected because obviously Crescendo was designed specifically for that. But a lot of their patients wanted something extremely slim, and Molto is the slimmest product in this whole space. A lot of our Molto female patients actually use it vaginally because they want to insert something very thin.
I love all the multi-use there.
Exactly. And what I love about it, most of all the things we've done is I would say more than 50% of the use cases are things we have not thought of.
Finally, let's talk about the Tenuto 2 and the Tenuto Mini. So who are those designed for? What's the technology behind that?
So Tenuto 2 and Tenuto Mini are actually quite a different tech. So all the other stuff we have, they have bendable structures inside to bend and adapt and deliver the vibrations when needed. Tenuto 2 and Tenuto Mini is just a smaller version of Tenuto 2. They have a special composite material that we created which stretches, and no matter how many thousands of times you stretch it, it will always come back to its original form and it will constrict the penis. So it was designed for erection. And what we learned early on was the penis is really complicated to develop a product for because the difference between a flaccid penis and an erect penis is significant. And what will be tight for an erect penis wouldn't even touch the flaccid penis. And what would be tight for the flaccid penis would be too uncomfortable for the erect penis. And the tightness really matters when it comes to erection and maintain erection because you want to hold the blood flow. So how do you then develop something which doesn't become so constrictive that one is uncomfortable and two, it doesn't even allow you to ejaculate. So that's why Tenuto 2 and Tenuto Mini are so different products internally, but the underlying science is the same, deliver vibration at a specific point to create blood flow, which then helps with erection.
Yeah. So is that the primary difference between like a traditional penis ring and the Tenuto? Is that customization that you instantly get depending on your particular size?
The biggest challenge was having that gap in the bottom. So it's not a full circle, but then the bottom bit is open so that you can stretch it and the passage or the semen is unobstructed and unconstricted so that no matter what happens, you can ejaculate and it won't be uncomfortable or painful. But equally, it will constrict the top and the sides enough so that you can maintain your erection. That was the most complex engineering challenge we had to overcome.
And again, for our sex therapists that are listening to this, so this is a good product for anyone experiencing like erectile difficulties, anything like that, right?
Correct. And the mini version is literally the smaller version, which actually was even harder. So we made it much later because we had to compress everything into a much smaller device. And the difference is Tenuto 2, the original big product, has a massive perineum simulator, which addresses severe ED, where the perineum stimulation creates way more arousal than venous stimulation alone. Like, for example, we have studies post-chemotherapy, post-prostate removal, prostatectomy, and being able to get erections back again, which is the most severe cases of ED. but that only works with 2, which is the big device with the stimulation of the perineum.
Mm.
Whereas Tenuto Mini is extremely small, extremely compact, extremely light, really nice user experience. And it works with what is called psychogenic ED, which is the most common ED, which is more psychological, stress related, etc., compared to a very complex post-surgery physiological ED. Tenuto Mini is perfect for most people. And then Tenuto 2 is the bigger device, which is very useful when you have severe ED.
All right. Now I want to talk to you a little bit about building a science-backed sex tech company. So what was the hardest part about bringing medical grade vibration devices to market?
I would say time. The hardest part is if you want to do it properly, you need to give yourself 10 years, I think. Nothing happens quickly in healthcare. The study I was mentioning about vaginismus, it took 6 years. It was supposed to take 3, but then it got stuck during COVID. And it's one of those things where you can't really rush doctors and hospitals. They have things to do, more important things to do. You have to do them to be taken seriously, to be an evidence-based company where the products have been tested on different patients, different demographics by different hospitals, different doctors in different countries, and published in respected peer-reviewed journals. To do all of that, it just is a long journey. The hardest bit is you don't know how long will it take, and you don't know if it will work. We have developed products so many times which didn't work, and then we had to go back to the drawing board.
And do you get a lot of pushback for being in the sexual health space in medicine? Do you think there's more stigma attached to it, or it's a little harder to get things done? Or do you feel like it's fairly equal to any other medical device?
There's 2 separate things. One is there's a big challenge with marketing in sexual health. I would say that is more corporate restriction issue like Meta. The bigger challenge in sexual health is lack of reimbursement. So the issue is if you don't have reimbursement codes, then it's harder for investors, whether they're corporates or VCs or hospitals, to invest in innovation which doesn't have a clear route to market.
Sure.
Or the route to market is out of pocket. Out of pocket is never an attractive business model in healthcare. If you want to build serious medical hardware and do trials and get regulatory approval and get enough patients, it costs money.
Are MV Health products available globally?
We have 5 regulatory approvals. So we are approved in US, Canada, UK, Europe, and Australia. And now we are working on UAE as the next one. It's again a very long, slow process.
And have you noticed differences in the markets or different challenges depending on which country you're
Yes.
selling in?
Yes, there's a huge difference in terms of how healthcare works. So if healthcare is fully government, like in UK it's 90% government and Europe it's majority government, then it is much harder to roll it out.
And so what are your plans for MV? Where else do you want to expand to?
Current products that we're working on are on period pain and mastitis and breast pain. So the period pain device should be ready soon. We think it will be ready by June, but we'll probably come across things that are not good enough. And then we'll decide, let's do next June. So hopefully the period pain device will be ready by June, which we're really excited about because it's our first truly consumer healthcare product. And the difference is very significant. If you have, let's say, pelvic pain, it's very unlikely you'll go to a CVS or Walgreens. It's not really where you would get a solution beyond a painkiller. You would need to go see some specialist. So it's very much traditional healthcare. Whereas with period pain, that's something you're very likely to search online or go to a pharmacy. And that's true direct-to-consumer healthcare. It's very unlikely that you would go to a doctor unless it's something very severe. That is where it gets very exciting because we can then deliver sexual healthcare at scale in masses through very simple routes like CVS, Walgreens, Amazon, anywhere at a very accessible sub-$100 price point so that everyone can easily purchase it. Because once you purchase it, that's it. You don't really need to pay ever again.
So now I want to do a little lightning round before we wrap up today. All right. So just tell me the first thing that comes to mind. And I've got a couple questions for you. The one misconception about MV devices.
That they're only for pleasure.
One clinical outcome you're most proud of.
Our publication in Nature magazine.
Ooh, okay. Tell me a little bit more.
Last year, one of our studies in psychogenic erectile dysfunction using Tenuto Mini got accepted and published in Nature magazine, which we as academics always get very excited about. And I guess it's because psychogenic ED is the biggest section of ED. 40% of ED maybe more. What is worse is it's growing very rapidly for a whole host of societal reasons, more work stress, social media news, etc. So psychogenic ED is rapidly becoming more and more prevalent, which wouldn't have been even say 10 years ago. It's a very significant healthcare issue on its own. And I think that is why it got picked up, because it's significant enough for the mass.
One engineering breakthrough that you're excited about?
We have been working on little sensors on our devices for years now for diagnostics purposes. What is so exciting about that is a very simple example is, Molto, which is the prostate device. If we can have the pressure sensor and then let's say the patient uses it once a week and after 6 months it captures the data. And this is all from a study perspective, not, obviously data to share, but it captures the data once a week. It will build a baseline for that person. Because again, this has to be quite personalized to the person. If they have enlarged prostate, over time, they'll be able to say, we are noticing consistently that the pressure is higher. We think you might have enlarged prostate. We would recommend you see someone. It's years away. But as a use case, that's exciting for us because we could, in theory, prevent significant complications by detecting early.
All right, my last one for you. What is one thing you wish founders in this space understood better?
Everything takes twice as long and costs twice as much than even we plan after 12 years. And actually, the best example is Apple, who are the leaders in hardware. When their first version of anything comes out, it's typically terrible. When iPhone came out, the first one was inferior in its tech to the Nokia. Then when Apple Watch came out, the first time the battery lasted like a few hours. Then when the Vision Pro, the massive goggles came out, you get a headache if you wore it more than half an hour. Always that. I'm sure by the time it's version 5 or 6 is amazing. But even the best hardware company in the world struggle with version 1.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so good. So good for founders to know. If they're expecting this to be an instant process, it's not going to happen that way. All right. Now, I want you to speak to the next generation. So, like our Gen Zs or Gen Alphas. What is one piece of advice you would give them about sexual health in general?
A more human connection and less screen time.
That's such a good one. All right. Now, before we go, you have presented with Sexual Health Alliance several times. So I'd love to hear about your experience as a presenter and what you think of Sexual Health Alliance.
So we had this session at the end when we had our lunch before leaving. And the best thing was what I realized is the energy in the room is the most exciting and the most positive of any conference I've ever been in. I think that's unique to Shaw, and the energy is so different and so happy and so positive and so warm.
All right. Well, that's it. Thank you so much for taking time to talk with me today, Soum.
Thank you for having me, as always. And I can't wait for October already.
Yes, I know. Me too. All right. Bye, everyone. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or wherever you listen. Links are in the description below.